You know, the movies paint your profession in an interesting light. Do they ever jump over fences?
The Weekly Friedman, your source for the most essential information in the default industry. With your host, Adam Friedman.
Today we're diving into a part of the legal world that's often overlooked but absolutely essential: service of process. Serving legal papers sounds straightforward, but it's more than just knocking on doors and dropping off papers. It's a critical part of our legal system filled with unique challenges and state-specific quirks. It's also a key component to consider when evaluating foreclosure timelines. I'm Adam Friedman, managing partner at Friedman Vartolo, and I'm joined today by Marty Lapidus, my good friend and also a seasoned service and process professional at Provest. Marty, thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Very excited to have you on here. You're a pretty big name in the default world, so I'm excited to have you on here. Let's jump right in. Is serving process in foreclosure different than serving process in other types of law?
Yes, it is. The taking of property is a serious thing, so the courts look at it and demand a higher threshold of information, especially in New York, where you have, different types of personal service. You have 3 different types. You can personally serve me to you. That's personal delivery. You have the other where I could serve a spouse or somebody that you live with. That's suitable age and discretion. And then also in New York, you have what's called nail and mail. The thing with nail and mail is you're required to go 3 times at different times of day. And then you're allowed to post if you know that the property and the people that you're trying to serve reside there. And you can get that information via either a postal trace. You could speak to neighbors to confirm if somebody lives there. You could certainly Google and see if there's some address connection with the name that you're serving and the address. So those are some of the things that the court requires when you're doing nail and mail service.
You mentioned Google. Does that happen a lot? Are you using that first before you look for someone, or do you generally know where to go?
No, we'll use social media to confirm any of the information that we have. I always think it's a good idea if you have a name of somebody and the opportunity to go and do a little investigation before you go out as a process server to make sure that you're getting to the right place at the right time. You want to serve process as quickly as you can, but you also want to make sure it's effective.
It's interesting too. You don't think about it, but I imagine 20, 30 years ago, much harder to find people, right? Like now you could just go online and you probably get a lot of information.
Yes, you can. It's night and day from 30 years ago. And when we talk about the foreclosure world, almost 30 years ago, and I'm almost in this business about 30 years, it took 180 days to get a foreclosure done in New York State. And today, the number is 10 times that, okay?
So you mentioned New York. Are there certain states that are harder to serve process in?
Yes, New York is one of the most demanding states to serve process in because the law is really interpretive. It's not set by statute. So if you hit the statute, you've conformed to the law and your case can move forward. I think when you submit an affidavit of nail and mail on a defendant, the court and the judge will look at that and try and confirm that the data that you provided the court is matching up.
So on the idea of, let's say, New York being more complicated or more difficult to serve in other states, is that limited to just foreclosure? Or are certain states just harder to effectuate service in?
No, I think it's foreclosure based.
Okay.
I do. I think that because it's property and the court looks at that as a serious matter, that is the difference. I think if it was a divorce or a personal injury, it's more apt to be able to just accept it as the affidavit states.
Are there any specific areas of specific states that are extremely difficult or really notable within the service of process world?
Yes, most definitely. So notoriously in New York, Kings County, Brooklyn, is a very difficult court to be able to serve your process on a nail and mail. The court is going to look at that nail and mail and make sure that the data you provided is there. Often they'll reject documents and give them back to attorneys for minor infractions or things that might not even be considered an infraction, but just to slow up the case. It's certainly a defendant-friendly court.
Okay.
Cook County, Illinois, as difficult in Kings as Kings to New York, comparable. I think they just came out with some new laws and statutes that make it a little bit more difficult for private process servers to get the work done. So that's a challenge for our company.
The movies paint your profession in an interesting light. Like whenever I'm training new paralegals, and I'm explaining service or process, I'm always telling them, look, no one's like jumping over fences. Do they ever jump over fences? Like, do you have situations like that?
I haven't really jumped over a fence, but I've left property rather quickly, feeling threatened. I've got a few stories I could share. I had a service one day on Hector Macho Camacho, and he was the manager of his son at the time, and they were having a boxing match down at Coney Island. And we arranged to have one of our process servers there. Got him a ticket for the event because we needed to. We had arranged it with the client. They were willing to pick up the expense. And at the end of the fight, he was able to get to Mr. Camacho Sr., and he served him there.
So we mentioned Google, using Google to try to get more information on someone you're attempting to serve. Are there other types of technology or things that have changed service process over the last, let's say, 10 years?
Well, social media has really helped in being able to confirm where somebody might be. People put information out there via Facebook or LinkedIn. These are all resources that we use to confirm or contact individuals that we're trying to serve process on.
You know, as everyone knows, lawyers practice where they're admitted. How does it work for companies like yours or people in your industry? Are companies working in specific geographic regions?
Service of process is very local, except for a couple of larger companies out there. And we are one of the larger companies out there. Provest has offices throughout the country. We do a lot of collection as well as foreclosure work. So we have offices on the West Coast, the East Coast, the South. We're all over. We do have some competitors out there, 2 or 3 other competitors. But we probably serve more papers than most companies that are out there. We are on the top 2 or 3.
To recap, from navigating foreclosure-specific nuances and overcoming quirky state regulations, it's clear that service of process is a lot more complex and critical than it may appear. Thanks for joining Marty Lapidus and I on the Weekly Friedman, your source to the most essential information in the default industry. Looking forward to seeing you next time, and thanks for tuning in.